Hey everybody, it's Matt Williams from Brand Federation with another Brand Federation cold take. This time it's just me. It's a beautiful, sunny, kind of chilly afternoon on a Friday here in Richmond. So I'm wearing my hoodie and I'm representing our friends at Grow, which is an amazing digital strategy and creative shop in Tidewater, Virginia. They're great. So if you need digital or creative, they have great hoodies too. So this is my Grow pitch. They didn't pay me anything for this. Anyway, so big news today. You've probably seen, if you've checked out the business news, that the Gap came out with their earnings and beat the hell out of everybody's expectations to the point where their stock is up over 20%. They have same store growth, comp growth year over year in all their brands for the first time in decades. And they are just hitting on all cylinders. So congratulations to everybody at the Gap. And as we were talking about it at Brand Federation, we realized there are some threads that go through the Gap story that we've seen happen with other clients that we've worked with who have successfully reinvigorated their brands and got them back on a growth trajectory. So Gap did some very smart things that we've seen other brands do. And it made us think, is there kind of a playbook here that the Gap reveals? And we think there is. So if we step back from the Gap story, one of the things that their CEO, Richard Dixon, talks about is coming into the business. And the first thing he did was get them on a sound operational footing. And if I talk to CEOs who've successfully gone through this process of reinvigoration, that's the first thing all of them do. They don't come in and think about the brand. They come in and they say, how do I get this business on a sound footing? And by doing that, what they do is open up essentially operational space and financial space for them to feel like, okay, the business is now solid. I have the space to now think about how I want to define this brand and how I want to motivate everybody and focus everybody on that new definition as they go forward. So that's the first step in the playbook. Then once you start thinking about the brand and how that focus can come to life, we actually have a framework that we talk about a lot at Brand Federation, and it's right here. So if we walk from left to right through this framework, you'll see how the Gap story relates, but also how lots of successful brand stories relate. And that first small oval on the left is brand conviction. And when the Gap CEO talks about his brand conviction, he actually talks about the cultural icon status of the Gap. This is a retail store that was opened in San Francisco back in the late 60s, early 70s. And it was all about connecting into youth culture and being at the very front end of the culture. They lost their way for a little while. So one of the first things he did after he put the company back on sound operational footing was get back to that brand conviction. And in the Gap's case, that's about making sure this is a brand that's at the center of culture. Everything they do has to be there. Once the brand establishes that conviction, it can then build a culture around it. So how does somebody like the Gap take this conviction around cultural icon status and build a culture around it? Well, Dixon talks about the culture of creativity. That's what puts you at the forefront of culture. The conviction turns into a culture of creativity. He then moves into the third stage, which is about building a brand experience. So how do I take that culture of creativity and translate it into brand experience moments that can continually reinforce that culture? And they did some really cool stuff. So they had Anne Hathaway show up on the red carpet wearing Gap clothes. They went back in and redesigned all their websites to make them cooler and more interesting. They focused the definition of all the different brands in their portfolio in a way that each of them had a different experience that complemented the others. So they got very smart about how they activated this culture of creativity. They brought in a brand name designer named Zach Posen and put him in charge of the products. And all of a sudden, the Gap went from being super boring and an also ran when it came to culture to a bunch of brands that are very much on the cutting edge again. So they took that culture of creativity and translated it into brand experiences. Then they go into communications. So he talks about the Gap's Linen Moves campaign as one that really helped them kind of accelerate into their position as a creative culture leader. That's an ad campaign, and it's really cool. And they sold a boatload of linen because of it. But what you'll notice is that this brand playbook that Dixon executed so brilliantly at Gap is the same playbook that lots of brands that we see across multiple categories and that we've worked with at Brand Federation have done. They don't start with communications and then move backwards. They start at the core of their company and they establish a conviction. What do we believe in? When we're on a sound operational footing, we have to decide what we believe in and focus the entire company on it. Then we build a culture around it. We translate that culture into brand expression, and then we think about communications. If we do the right things in those sequence, we can reinvigorate the brand the way the Gap has. So congratulations to everybody who works at the Gap and who works in partner companies who work with the Gap. You've done amazing things. It's a great story, but it's a story that all of us can learn from. And if you step back and start to look at some of the brand success stories over the past decade, you'll see some threads, and we think the threads come to life in that oval approach that we take with all of our clients at Brand Federation. So interesting lessons coming out in today's Gap news. Thanks for joining. Love to know what you think. Love to hear any examples that you have of brands that have reinvigorated themselves using this playbook or some variation of it or a different playbook. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So give us a like, drop a comment in the comments below, and we will see you next time on Brand Federation's Cold Takes. Talk to you soon.